I'm going to take a little step back to talk about the sort of story that we wanted to tell. And maybe to do that, how many people have seen the film? Anyone seen the film? No? Okay, all right. So obviously you've got 1,500 cans of footage from probably 30 years of Greenpeace. But I sort of went back really and started to read the books of the early founders. I sort of knew that I wanted to make a film that was about the growth of an activist organization. It wasn't an activist film, but it was about campaigning. And I started reading the books of Bob Hunter. And Bob Hunter was the first president of Greenpeace. He was a sort of journalist, and his books are the opposite of things a president should write. You know, they're very funny, they're very self-critical, they're full of doubt, sometimes very dark. You know, in the course of this period, he had a kind of breakdown, which was about his struggle with the idea of leadership. You know, Bob was a kind of anarchist. He hated leaders of all kinds, and he found himself the leader of this organization, which was growing very, very quickly. So pretty early on, you know, going back to thinking about what's the shape of this thing that I want to tell, I sort of knew that Bob Hunter needed to be the center of the film, the sort of narrative center of the film, and that I was going to use his writings. The story I was interested in telling was a bit like the story of a band, of a music band, you know, who form, they're a very tight creative group. They suddenly have enormous success. You know, the Greenpeace's kind of hit single moment was capturing this footage of a harpoon going over the heads of two of them into a whale. And this footage went sort of viral. You know, they wouldn't have used that word in those days, but it went across the kind of world news networks. And the consequence of that was that hundreds of Greenpeaces all around the world sort of sprang up. And as kind of anarchists, they felt that was a sort of good thing to do. You know, just it's a movement. It's not an organization. Let's just let people do their thing. But what started to happen is people would do their thing, sometimes raising money on the back of what they were doing in Vancouver, and then the money would disappear. And so they gradually, as they grew, had to come to grips with the problems of whether they were an organization or a movement. Did they need structure? Did they need to lead? And for Bob, those became very sort of human issues about his own relationship with authority, and took an enormous effect on him. And yet at the end, you know, by 1979, I kind of knew that the film needed to end in 1979, because at that moment, this very small group of people handed over Greenpeace to a different structure. So they basically gave away the thing they had created, a bit like a parent of a child needing to sort of say goodbye as they go out the door. So there was a kind of sadness to the story as well. But I sort of knew very early on that that was the shape within all this material that I wanted to take. So then, you know, kind of one of the things I suppose that fascinated me about this project was that the founders of Greenpeace, who you could really pin down to about sort of, you know, 10 or 11 people, all had kind of very difficult relations with each other now, and they had very different ideas about that history, and they positioned themselves very differently in terms of environmental action. You know, so the founders of Greenpeace include Paul Watson, who set up Sea Shepherd and is still in the Southern Atlantic ramming Japanese whalers. And they include Patrick Moore, who is a sort of denier of climate change and who, you know, a spokesperson for Monsanto and for, you know, deforestation companies. So a huge sort of, you know, a massive difference, if you like, in ideas about the world. And I was interested in Bob's role as this kind of leader who didn't want to be a leader, who could sort of fuse these different aspects of people together into an effective organization. And so I suppose one of the things I was interested in was the interplay between the present and the past. And I wanted to try and create a film in which you would sometimes be in the present day of the character, but you'd be hearing the past, or you'd be in the past and hear the present day. And this is just an example of a section of the film.